for Young Women, which is a 6 through 12 all-girls Catholic school in Rochester, New York. I'm their information systems analyst, so I work with all of our databases. So Razor's Edge, Financial Edge, the K-12, as well as a bunch of other softwares. And basically, I got started with the Power BI just watching one of these sessions that Matt did, and kept going with his instructions, and I could not have done it without his help.
Awesome. But it's fun. I mean, I think I'm looking around the room, and probably about a quarter of the people on this call I've worked with at different points on different types of projects, and everyone is very different than every other one. So that's part of what makes it fun, is the customizability of some of these tool sets. So Amy, do you want to share your screen, and we can
Sure.
start with a couple of things? Really, I guess to kind of frame the reason that we even put this call together. Amy asked a question about pulling GPA data alongside student activity participation and being able to see those side by side. So if I wanted the average GPA by the Model UN versus average GPA by the basketball team, being able to pull those data points so that we can tie them together. I think today what we're going to look at is activities related, but the reality is that it's an identical set of steps that we can do for athletics or academics or advisories or anything else. And really the big thing that we're going to dive into today is, in some areas we can pull data straight from the advanced list in Blackbaud. And in today's scenario, we'll pull that activity participation for each student from that advanced list. But for any of you who've lived in the advanced list world, you know that the GPA value is not stored in the back end of the Blackbaud system in a place that we can feed it through an advanced list. So we have to take a side door to be able to leverage that data alongside some of the data that we can pull from the advanced list. And what we'll do today is we'll run a student list that contains some of that GPA information. We'll save it as a Google Sheet, and then we'll look at how we can tie that data coming from a Google Sheet to the live data that we're pulling through the back end of Power BI through the API. So that's kind of the 10,000 foot view of what we're looking at today. And so, Amy, really, can we start? Maybe we just build the first advanced list that contains students with the activity participation.
Sounds great. Go for it.
Awesome. All right. So I am taking control of Amy's screen.
I'm going to mute real quick, though, because I have my dogs in the background just in case.
Oh, mine are under my desk, so at any moment we may hear them as well. So
Yep.
Apologies in advance. So we're looking at the advanced list in Blackbaud, and I've done hour-long webinars on just advanced lists. Those are posted out to the same place that we'll record this. So if anybody is trying to get deeper into advanced lists, that's a place to go to see some of those things. But really, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab a user base. And because this session is being recorded, I'm not going to pull out student names. I'm going to pull out the user IDs, and then we'll pull out the activities details, but I don't want to maybe put your name information out into any sort of recorded environment. And then you and we can connect later and tie the names back in after the fact. So I've got the user base, which contains basic biographical info. I'll grab user detail. And then this advanced list tool, all I'm asking the system to do here is give me a list of students with the activities that they've participated in over the years. I'm going to grab under the activity group, I'm going to grab the activity enrollment, and that just ties the student to a specific activity group. Then I'm going to say, give me the activity group itself, which functions similarly to like a course record, where it's just the, what is the activity that we're looking at. Actually, I'm sorry, that group is like the class section, excuse me. So the enrollment is the student enrollment, the group is the individual class section, and then this activity base functions similar to like a course base if I'm looking at the courses of students enrolled in. And then really those should be the nodes that I need to be able to produce a list of, a student with every activity that they've participated in really at any time that they're at the school. And here, I'm going to leave all these joins as inners. We could talk for 30 minutes about why we're doing that. But in this case, we only want to pull kids who are enrolled or have been enrolled at some point in an activity. in my filters, just as we're validating, I'm going to start by just saying, give me current year activities, just so we can get a rough sense of, does our roster look like we'd expect it to? And actually, as I'm saying that, I think I need to grab an activity term. Here we go. We'll grab the activity term to be able to isolate the current year. There we go. So now we've got the details we need. I'm going to start by just saying that my filter here is going to look at that activity term where the school year is 24-25. And we'll start with this, but know that we can go back in time and pull history as well if there's value in seeing that. And so now really it's looking at every kid enrolled in any activity during the current school year. So I'm going to output from the user base, I'll throw out a user ID. Could I put a first name, Amy, if we don't go last name, just so we can identify kids are different? All right. Thank you. And then in my user detail, well, this is not very interesting for Amy because it's all female, but I could put out gender, I could put out date of birth, I could put out a million different things that I may want to slice by later. Then on the enrollment, this is where we get pretty deep into the weeds, where within the activity group, I'm going to get to the base and just say, what is this activity that we're looking at? So we'll grab the title, we'll grab the school level, we'll grab a code. Maybe that's interesting at some point. And then the activity term, we'll look at the term description and the school year. And school by school, these things are going to have different values in them. If you're on semesters versus trimesters versus quarters, or maybe activities are year long, or maybe activities are trimesters and academic semesters are semesters. You can have any combination of things, but this general set of entries will apply across the board to all schools just because of the way the data is stored in the back end of Blackbaud. And so now I should see, this information for the current school year with all of the currently enrolled students. And anytime we do this live and demo, I'm sure I messed something up and we'll go fix it. But let's see what we get as a starting point. All right, there we go. Actually, I feel like that's pretty clean. So within robotics, it looks like I've got, I don't know, 20 or so kids. The voice, I've got a handful of kids. Amy, ballparking numbers of kids in activity groups, does this feel like about what we'd expect to see?
It does. This is our first year using the activity groups for our clubs, so not all of our clubs are in here yet. So
Okay.
yeah, this looks good.
Okay, awesome. And that being the case, we've isolated it to just 24-25, but if we had 10 years of history, and if I wanted to look at, average GPA of every kid over the past decade in the voice versus robotics, the data exists to be able to start asking those questions and telling those stories. So really, at this point, I've got a list that's giving me some information. So what I'm going to do is save it, and we'll just call this student. And then a couple things here. Once I've built and saved this list, I need to grab this list ID that's tied to that list because that's the tool that I'm going to use to feed it through the API over to Power BI. So generally what I do, just to make it searchable down the road, if I ever need to reverse engineer what I'm looking at, I'm going to copy that list and I'll just bake it into the name of the list so that I've got an easy way to go back and find it if I'm trying to see which list is feeding what information through the API. And then the one other thing that I'll do is share the role access with the Web Services API Manager role, which is the tool that enables this specific list to be fed through the API. If you've got hundreds or thousands of old lists in your system, we can never feed any list data out of the system until we give view access to this Web Services API Manager role. And that'll come to play in just a couple of minutes when we get over to Power BI. So at this point, we've done, the list configuration work. I'm going to just scribble down that list ID so we've got it. So 149, 485. Just put it up here. And then we'll do a separate student list to pull GPA information. So Amy, as we're looking at GPAs, are you, most concerned with, cumulative coming into this year, or kind of what GPA info are we looking for? First quarter?
No, cumulative from the past year.
Okay.
or up to this year. Yeah.
Awesome. And really what we're going to do with that is we're going to build, we'll jump over to academics. And then from here, we're able to build a students list, or I guess I could have done that from core as well. If I come anywhere in academics, we'll do a students list. And it kind of drives me nuts that I can't pull that GPA through an advanced list, but also it's being calculated in real time every time we run it on a report card or a transcript. So, I get it. They're not really storing it anywhere, but they're kind of storing it somewhere, which is why we can still pull it through a students list here. So I'm going to adjust our columns just so we're not seeing any details that tie the GPA to the student. Let's get the user ID. And then I'm going to get rid of names and addresses and all the other things. Email can go. And then grad year is nice to have. So actually we'll hold on to that grad year. So we've got that marker for, almost grade level. And then really from here in the columns, I'm going to tell it to include some GPA information. And any of you who've ever done this know that it's a lot of guessing and checking to see what previous is and what the 19 different versions of, GPAs are that might exist. Amy, from your side, is there a weighted versus unweighted, or do you know which one we'd like to see?
Yeah, I do the high school weighted. You go here. Um, yep, that works.
This guy here?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. And that one says current term. I'm going to pull both current and previous
Or
because it
yeah.
may not give us anything. And I have done this a million times and I still guess and check every time to see what is coming out.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. So I've got some middle schoolers where it looks like we don't have a GPA in place yet, but my older kids, I do have, a GPA of some sort. And if I just sort that, high to low, we'll just kind of see, ballpark what we're looking at. And that's low to high. Now we'll go high to low. And this is one where I can't build a filter to only show, well, I guess maybe I could build one to only show the students with a GPA, but really for something like this, I'm totally fine with blanks coming out of this. So if there are things that come out as blanks, when I do the connecting within Power BI, if there's a blank, there's a blank, it'll just come through as a zero, or it'll come through as a blank, and I can just leverage the ones that I actually have information for. So what I'm going to do is we'll just save this and we'll call it student cumulative GPAs or something like that. And then we'll save it. And then all I'm going to do now is I've just got this file that has a user ID and a GPA. And then that's the data I want to be able to overlay with my athletics information that we've already pulled out. So we're going to export this. And then sometimes that goes quickly. There we go. So we've got that student work list. And kind of the next thing that we're going to look at is how can I leverage that information within Power BI? So we'll jump to Power BI in just a minute, but I want to get the framework in place so that we've got everything we need to be able to feed the data across. And in this case, we'll just open this CSV file and then we'll create a new Google Sheet and then we'll be able to feed that data over to Power BI. So Amy, did that open up on your side?
It did.
Okay, awesome.
Right. Let me grab that. You want me to put it in a Google Sheet for you?
Yeah, that'd be great, actually.
Okay.
And we'll just kind of look at how we can share that over.
It's thinking.
And this is, right now we're looking at GPAs, but literally any other data point that we might want to feed that we can't pull through an advanced list, whether it's, yeah, I don't know, tuition details or, student health form completion or, colleges students have applied to, anything that we can add to a Google Sheet, we're able to feed over to Power BI and overlay with the Blackbaud data. And so this looks fantastic. We can really just give it a name. So, rather than untitled spreadsheet, we'll just call this student GPAs, something like that. And then because this is created by Amy, there's no reason that we need to share it with someone else. But if a different person was going to be building within Power BI than the person who owns the spreadsheet, as long as that person has that shared access within the Google Sheet, that user would be able to log in from Power BI and to connect to this data set. So while we're here, I'm just going to literally copy that. And then, Amy, do you want to open Power BI for us?
Sure. All right. Can you see that?
Not yet.
No?
We're just seeing the
Let me.
Google Sheets. Dave, I just saw your note. Yeah, so as long as the sheet is shared with a user, you can, as long as the link, like if you were to be able to click the link and if it will let you go in and log into that Google Sheet or see that Google Sheet, then we can feed it through Power BI. And actually, because Amy and I have done a bunch of other work over the years, I'm going to leverage a existing report just so we can copy some of the coding. And again, I've done several of these webinars where I've walked through how to get that initial connection in place. I don't want to go too deep into that today because we've done it, but I'm happy to kind of talk anyone through that separately. Can we just open one of these, Amy, just to grab
Sure.
list
Yeah, go
structure?
right ahead.
All right, awesome. Oh, hold on. Never mind. I don't want to do that.
Wrong.
Um, Let's see if let's just go to open and see if we've got one. Um, Actually, no, I love this. Amy's got them all set up to, for the browser-based access right now. So Valerie, saw your note about Excel. We can do the same thing with Excel, but in order to get it to be refreshable, we've got to put it out to like a SharePoint site or a OneDrive for Business folder, and then link to that, and that starts to get a little bit wonky on us. I like the Google Sheets method because it's just that pure web-based access. But I've done very similar things with Excel. It's just a few more hoops to jump through. All right, awesome. There we go.
Let's
PBIX.
one.
And we won't even look at the visual itself. We'll basically just steal the code from the back end. Hillary, question on advanced list and Google Sheet number of rows. I found that with advanced list, I generally try to keep them under 50,000 rows. Once I hit 50,000, sometimes they'll fail on refresh, sometimes they won't, but that's the number that scares me. So a lot of times if I'm looking at, 20 years of grade history or every, inquiry that a person, or I'm sorry, every checklist item that's ever come through, I'll parse that out into a dozen different lists within Blackbaud, feed it to Power BI, and then stitch it together within my data set within Blackbaud. Google Sheets, it's something similar. It'll grab anything that's in that Google Sheet, but sometimes it'll load more quickly if you do something else. Is that
Is it?
trying to open?
I think it is.
Okay, awesome.
Just being really slow.
No, that's fantastic. And really, the reason that we're opening this other file is because we've got a snippet of code that's about 8 lines long that I've got published out to a website that you can literally copy and paste to get started with pulling the list data from Blackbaud. The couple things that we update for each user are the key and the secret associated with the user that has access to the API, the domain of the school. So in Amy's case, is it Mercy or what's it?
Yeah, Mercy HS.
Mercy HS. Perfect. And then the ID of the list. But otherwise, it's identical for every school to be able to go grab the data and get started in the polling. But that'll make a little more sense when we see it in a minute. Um, let's see. Actually, you know what? While we're waiting on that to load, I'll start by getting that data from the Google Sheet, and then we'll go grab that list data and overlay it together. So what I'm going to do is jump into the more section and get data. I just want to tell the system, jump out to Google, go grab whatever you find in that sheet and then load it so that I can use it. And in get data, I'm just going to type Google. I've got access to Google Sheets. I'll say connect. And then it's fine. It's just telling me that, do I trust Google to be able to give me data? I'm not going to check that for you, Amy, just in case at some point you want to, read the fine print.
Okay.
We'll say continue. And then I'm just going to paste the URL of that list. So it's truly copy it from the browser, paste it here. It's not going to let me go grab that data until I authenticate. So because this is Amy's sheet that we've created, she's able to sign in to get access to that. If I tried to log in, I would not be able to grab the data from that sheet. So Amy, on your side, did that pop a browser open that asked
Yep.
you to give permission? Okay,
Yep.
perfect.
All right. It says sign in is complete.
Perfect. And then from here, we're just going to say connect, and it will load the data from that Google Sheet into Power BI for us to use it as a data source. And there we go. So it's seeing that sheet one within that link. I'll check the box and there we go. So I've got the grad year, user ID, and then the GPA value. I'm going to tell it to transform the data. There's just a couple things I like to do up front to make sure it recognizes that first row as the header. I think that's probably the one thing that we'll need to do in the transformation here. But sometimes we'll tell it that date fields are date fields and that it's not just a text entry field. The zip codes are zip codes if we're doing mapping with a lot of this underlying data. Those types of things. And Amy, we're still seeing just the Power BI desktop piece. Is the query editor
Oh,
open on your side?
it is. It is. Let me share
Okay.
the whole thing. Yep.
Okay. Thank you. All right. There we go. Awesome. So now we're seeing the Power Query, which is Microsoft's set of tools that actually pulls the data in. All I'm going to do here is say use first row as headers. So rather than seeing column 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm just going to pull that in. And then a couple other things that I'll do here. This column is empty. I don't want anything that's going to potentially confuse me. So I'll just click on that and say delete. I could have done that in the Google Sheet. I could have done that within the list within Blackbaud. Either way is fine. Now I'm just seeing these three columns. And then the other thing here is I don't necessarily need to see that full name of what that GPA is. I'm just going to call it GPA so that it's an easier field to work with within Power BI. So we're going to rename. And as long as we know, behind the scenes what we're doing with that GPA, we'll know what we're working with. Oh, let me try that again. Rename. There we go. So I've got GPA, user ID, and grad year. Then if I were to close and apply, then actually because that was shared. Amy,
Yep.
do you want to share? Are you comfortable sharing the entire screen just so we can jump
Sure.
between those spreadsheets?
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, perfect. So now, we're back in Power BI. I'm going to take that. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to request remote control one more time. There we go. And then the sheet one, I'm going to rename this as, we'll call it, I don't know, GPA data. And then we'll open that other, oops, it's my screen, not your screen. We'll open that other spreadsheet. Can you take us to that other Power BI report, Amy? Yeah,
Yep.
there we go. Perfect. And then here, yeah, there we go. All that I'm going to do here is go grab this guy right here. We're going to say edit query. And I'm going to grab the first 8 lines from the code snippet. And that will enable us to feed the list data from the list that we just created to Power BI. And so from here, I'm going to jump to the advanced editor. And again, I apologize if this is the first time a lot of you guys have looked at Power BI. Check out, oh, hold on, never mind.
Actually, yeah, you're gonna want one of the,
Got it. Yeah, I forgot you've done some really cool stuff here. So we'll go get this guy instead. But I think this is an example where Amy may have had too much data in that list. So she
yeah,
created 4 lists and then appended them together within Power BI to bypass the row limit or the timeout limit.
exactly.
So I'm literally just going to copy this guy. And then if we jump back over, oops, can you take us back to that other Power BI?
Yep.
Awesome. Beautiful. And then here, I'm going to go home. I'm going to say get data. I'm going to choose blank query as my option. And I'll jump into the advanced editor here and just literally paste that same thing that we saw on the other side. So Control V. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't get it. Amy, do you want to copy and paste that over? I apologize.
Yeah, no worries. There
All
you
right.
go.
Beautiful. Thank you. And then just a couple things here because we've got this one extra step baked in that says what the headers were in that previous one. I'm going to get rid of this expanded column 1 step. And this is starting to get a little wonky on the Power Query stuff in Power BI, but it's the same set of steps every time. And then I just say that I want it to be, closing out that step. And then the one other thing I'll do is I'm going to swap out that list ID so that rather than Amy's attendance list that's pulling that data, we're going to pull that 149,485. We'll say done. And then it's going to ask, how we want to connect to Blackbaud. We'll say connect. And really, the only data that is available to flow from Blackbaud to Power BI at this point are advanced lists that have been specifically shared with a user that has access to that web services API manager role. And it's only the data in those lists themselves that can be pulled out. So there's no login associated with these credentials. There's no Blackbaud ID. Nobody could ever actually log into the website. All that could happen is that those specific lists can be fed through the API to this outside source. And from here, I'm seeing just a snapshot now, that same 255 rows we saw within Blackbaud. I'm seeing 255 rows of advanced list data here. All looks good to me. I don't have any dates that I need to change and tell them that they're dates instead of text entries. So we'll rename this as activities. And then I'm going to close and apply. And then at this point, I've got one data set coming from Google Sheets. I've got one data set coming straight from the Blackbaud Advanced List. And now we can marry it together. There we go. Perfect. So really the first step anytime we're feeding to Power BI is just get your data sources lined up, get everything in place. The next thing I'm going to do is tell it, how do I know between those two data sets, what's what, which way is up, which kid is tied to which kid in each data set. So I'm literally very, very similar to Access. If anyone's done any work in Access, looks a little scary, feels a little scary. In reality, not too bad for some of this basic type of work where I'm just going to say that look at the user ID in one list and map it to the user ID in the other list so that I know that, kid from list A is the same as kid from list B. It sees it as a many to one cardinality. And again, we could spend an hour going through what that means. But what that tells us is in that GPA list, we have one row per student. So that's the one side of the many to one. On the activities list, some students have more than one activity associated with them. So that's the many side. And the ways that we can use the data change depending on the cardinality of the links between them. But just suffice it that in this case, if I can get to a starting point where I have a list that has exactly one row for each record that I'm concerned with, this part just works cleanly as we're tying in other data points. So now let's go moment of truth and we'll start building some tools leveraging this data. This matrix a lot of times is the first thing that I'll pull, and it's really kind of an automated pivot table is all that we're doing here. Kind of telling it how to kind of use and pull the data. So I'm going to start by actually asking it within the activities to show me the activity title as my rows. And then I'll get just a listing of every activity that's included in that list. And then I'm going to tell it to just give me the average GPA of the kids within those areas. So I'm going to tell it the GPA, the values. I don't want a count of the GPAs. That doesn't help me. I want to see the average GPA. Yep. And actually, let me do a little bit more gymnastics here because right now that looks like that's the overall average GPA. What I'm going to do is feed this GPA value from the GPA data into this activities data. So just kind of shuffle it across so that I've got all that data in the same table. This is where sometimes the Power BI learning curve can be a little bit steep. Getting the data there is clean, but let's just see if we can do this quickly. I'm going to create a new column within the activities data, and I'm just going to tell it, go find the GPA for each kid, and then we'll be able to report on that directly. So I'll just say GPA equals related GPA. And because I've got that one-to-many relationship, it should say, all right, even though a kid's in multiple activities, I want to pull the GPA across into the table so that I can start doing some data transformation work with the data that's just in that one table that we're working with. So now let's tell it to grab that GPA and we'll take an average. So I don't need a sum. That doesn't really help me in that case. I'll say, give me the average. And there we go. So now if I wanted to sort that high to low, looks like that makes sense to me. The National Honor Society is the highest average GPA. And we can just see those listings. Exactly the same tools are available for athletics, for even clubs or advisory groups or other things like that. We just structure that list a little bit differently on the back end. And then maybe I want to be able to see some additional information there. So maybe I want to see, those kids that are in National Honor Society, show me the first name and the GPA, and maybe I want to see the year as well. So let's look at the actually, I'm going to pull that grad year over as well into that activity section because maybe I want to be able to filter this on, my seniors in activities. What are they looking like? I could have added that in the advanced list within Blackbaud, but we'll leverage the fact that we have that student list to pull that information across. So I'll do another new column here. And then this one we'll just call grad year equals related grad year. So we're going to throw that out as well. And then I'm going to put the user ID out. Right now, it thinks I'm trying to sum this, and it looks like there's multiple kids named Adeline or Adeline. So once I throw the user ID out, that'll become a little cleaner. Or you know what? That looks like that kid's in 4 activities. So let's output the activity itself. There we go. So now if I want to see those NHS kids, these become interactive because I've built all this on the same page. I can say, show me just those kids in NHS. And then this reacts to show me the details for that group of students in the National Honor Society. Um, let's put a filter on. So maybe at least initially, I'm just concerned with my seniors. I've got this underlying data. I've got a visual. I've got the information that's filterable and pulls itself together. Actually, you know what? That sum of GPA is confusing me. I want to tell it to give me the average in the same way as we're seeing the average up here. So rather than sum, I'm going to call it the average. And there, my 4.06 matches my 4.06, and I can see the kids that fall into that bucket. But maybe, at this point, I'm concerned more with just my seniors, and I want to see what's going on there. So we'll throw the grad year in. In my slicer settings, I'll just make it a vertical list, and I'll say, give me just my seniors. Then I can see those kids, see the details, but know that I'm only looking at the senior class when I'm looking at that information. And I think you start to see really, really quickly that there's a million directions we could go with this. Really, any data point that lives either on the student record within Blackbaud or that we could feed into the Google Sheet becomes available for us to build, layers and layers and layers of reporting infrastructure around. And I know I've been talking a lot here, so I want to kind of step back. Amy, anything that you want to share about kind of, lessons learned from your side or anything else before we open it up?
Um, Not really. I'm just every time I watch you, I learn something new though.
Well, I have beat my head against this stuff for about 7 years, and so I've accidentally learned a lot of things here. How to do things the wrong way first, and then I figure out the right way to do it. All right, we'll save this. A couple other quirky things here where I've got that grad year where it's summing it. But anybody else in the room? I know we've got a good group today. Any questions, thoughts? Nope. Okay, awesome. All right. So at this point, we've built this set of tools. Um, we've got, some filters in, but we could add a million others. We could include, attendance, and the courses that these students are enrolled in and their advisors. And we could overlay the athletics with the activities into the same list and then could filter based on athletic groups versus activity groups. 100 different ways to, build on top of what we've already built here. But when we get it to the point that we want to take it beyond just Amy's desk, and she may want to share this with I don't know, the club advisors or the head of school or, any of 20 other people on campus. Amy, can we walk through kind of how we publish this out and share?
Yeah, definitely.
All right, awesome. So we've got this guy here. And actually, one more thing I'll point out while we're here. Anytime I want to refresh this data, I've got the option to just hit the refresh button, and then that information will go grab fresh data from the Google Sheet and from the list within Blackbaud. And we'll publish this out online. And then once we've done that, we can go behind the scenes and tell the system to automatically refresh itself, daily or, hourly throughout the day to ensure that we're as close to up to date as possible anytime we're looking at these reporting tools.
So Matt, the advanced list will automatically update every time it's run, but the Google Sheet, you will have to go in and run the student list and update that anytime there's an update, like every quarter or year or whatever.
Exactly right. And
Okay.
actually, I think I saw Carolyn Stevens on this call, but Carolyn from Cranbrook and I put together the idea of doing this probably what 3-4 years ago, Carolyn, if you're on. But yes, it's having that list saved within the Sky list within Blackbaud. You just run it, export it, overwrite your own data within the Google Sheet, and then
Hmm.
it'll update itself at that point.
Okay.
And actually, Matt, I saw a question. I cannot see it. I'm trying to figure out my Zoom settings to be able to see. All right, there we go. So it says it's a success. It's published. A little bit of background. I didn't get into much of the detail on this early on, but this Power BI software that we're working with right now, it's installed locally on Amy's desktop, just like Excel or Microsoft Word would be installed locally. So all of that building that we did directly on Amy's machine. Has to be a Windows machine for doing building, but once it's been built and distributed, any user on any device is able to interact with it. So that act of building takes place on the Windows machine. This publishing actually pushes it out to an online portal where other users who may not have access to the backend report files and can't do the building are able to jump in and interact with the data from there. So now we're going to go from this local instance to, I'll say, open here. And this is the browser-based online Power BI service. And it functions exactly the same way. It just lives within the browser universe now. So I can still, toggle. It's reactive. A lot of times, what I'll end up doing is if I want somebody to be able to live within the report infrastructure and within Blackbaud at the same time, I see Grace Rios on the line right now. We've done a ton of work with her school on the admission side, but we build a link directly into this row where I can click the link and it'll take me straight to the user's record within the Blackbaud suite. So I can very quickly toggle between the reporting tools and the live Blackbaud data. This formatting 2027.00, we can clean all that up. So a lot of things that we can do to put some polish on the way that we're looking at these things. And then once this is built, once it's pushed out here, Amy's got several of these. I know her admissions office is doing some cool stuff. She does a lot on the academic side. We're able to manage the refresh schedule and manage distribution of the list or who can access these different sets of tools that we've built. So in Amy's workspace, I can either manually refresh the data from here, or I can schedule a refresh. And when I go to that scheduled refresh, with the Google Sheets, it's one extra step out here to be able to schedule this refresh. For the web just refers to the Blackbaud connection. So in this case, I'll say edit credentials, sign in, we're off and running because we've got that key and the secret baked into the query itself. It's just referring back within the query to get that data. Everything we've built here is using the onAPI, Blackbaud's legacy API. The Sky API, I have been trying for 4 years to figure out a way to automate the refreshes using the Sky API, but they make you jump through 19 hoops to be able to do that. So I'm still using Sky until I can find a better way, but the on just works and it's really simple and it's really functional and really powerful. So in this case, the Google Sheets, um, it's going to ask Amy to sign in again. Again, it doesn't want just some random person being able to go in and grab the data from her Google Sheet. So we'll just say that yes, Amy has access to Amy's data when she's logged in to Power BI. And to Amy's point, that GPA data, it may go months without changing. Really, it's only when we go back in and overwrite that with updated GPA data that it becomes important that that refresh is going. But I do want that activity data to refresh as it's going. If there are going to be spring activities that we want to have start flowing into the system, I like to have these refreshes running, even if that GPA data is not changing. And once I've edited my credentials, we can say, you know what, go up and, update this every morning at, I don't know, 7 a.m. And we can do up to 8 times a day with the standard Power BI licensing. So we'll say apply. And then we'll be able to see from Amy's workspace that this is scheduled to refresh tomorrow. Did I choose 2 a.m.? I must have chosen 2 a.m. I don't know. It's scheduled to refresh at some point in the future, or it looks like the last time it was updated was 12/13. I can just force a refresh anytime I want to do it, and it'll go out and grab fresh data and feed it into the back end of the system. And so that's not particularly exciting to watch. But once that data refreshes, the report itself will update and I can manage the distribution from here. So again, I know we're cramming a lot into an hour today. Happy to go deeper at any point, or I've recorded several other sessions that go into some of these things in a lot more detail. But in this more options, I can manage permissions. And then if Amy had 3 people on campus who she wanted to be able to see the web-based view of this manage permissions enables her to give access to those groups of users. And I saw several questions come through, and I'm trying to find where I can see the chat. I apologize. Does anybody want to just throw questions out? I saw them written, but I'm too dumb to find them in Zoom here.
Matt, there's a question about being able to use Power BI on a Mac. We're doing that at my school, just using Parallels. So it does you need to use the desktop version to be able to build these reports. But if you have either Parallels or Boot Camp on your Mac, you can run Power BI desktop within that environment.
Yeah, thank you, John.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And a lot of schools will have, a single Windows laptop doesn't need to be particularly powerful that the building will take place from. And then once it's published, doesn't matter what type of device we're on. So I can see it as easily on the Power BI app on my iPhone as I can through a Mac browser or a Windows browser. And also a lot of the work I do with schools, if they don't want to get their hands dirty in the building of the reports, there's a lot of cases where I just build on the back end, publish it out, and then end users can just live in the data through just that browser-based interface. Any other questions, thoughts? No? Okay, awesome. There we go. Yeah, so we've got this report built. You can imagine the million different ways that we could pull this in. Jean and I are doing some work at her school where we're pulling some potentially development data alongside some academics and admissions data. So as long as we've got some sort of an equivalent of a user ID mapped between systems, we could just as easily pull the Razor's Edge giving history alongside this as we did Google Sheets data that's showing us the GPA information. So it really opens a lot of possibilities on how we can leverage data from different departments to tell a million different stories.
So do you link that directly with a query from Razor's Edge, or how are you getting the data out of Razor's Edge?
Um, that's a great question. So the Razor's Edge side, there's a custom connector that we can install that Power BI desktop will see that lets us log in. So John and I just did this a couple of weeks ago with her team. But basically, we set up a Sky API developer account.
Hmm.
We create an app within the Power BI, I'm sorry, excuse me, within the Blackbaud environment. And then we take the credentials, feed them into the custom connector. It sounds very complicated. It's not. Jean and I did it in maybe an hour. We got it up and running where we've actually got data flowing. But it's truly building a custom connector that at the end of the day lets us go and grab the actual table data from Razor's Edge. So we've pulled in all constituents, all gifts, all constituency codes, all attributes, all we can filter it to show, just soft credits or just, matching gifts or, layers and layers of things, all the funds, all the campaigns, all the appeals, really any data points that are being stored within Razor's Edge. We can backdoor into Power BI. And then once it's there, as long as we have some sort of a marker between Razor's Edge and Core, sometimes it's the user ID from Core that we import to Razor's Edge. Sometimes it's the constituent ID from Razor's Edge that we import to Core. As long as one of those common data points exists between systems, we can tie it together and do exactly the same things as we did with this Google Sheets data here. So hundreds of directions to potentially go with it. All right. Well, if no other questions, please reach out if I can help at any point. I've actually got a session. Paul, give me one second. My dog's there. No.
I'll just chime in here. Matt's totally right. It was not nearly as scary to attach this to create the connector for the Razor's Edge data. I was like, and then he walked us through it, and I'm like, okay, that's totally doable.
Yeah,
So
but did you import the IDs into Core, or did you take the Core and put it into Razor's Edge?
so far we're just using Razor's Edge. I Razor's Edge data in the connector that we built, but I did it both ways. I pulled the Razor's Edge. I actually used constituent code and I put it into the host ID field in Core. And then I put the Core user ID in an attribute in Razor's Edge. So I've got it cross listed.
And Matt, you said you have a lot of other videos. How do we get access to those just to watch them? And then I'm sure there's a link in there, like to contact you if we could, like, about your services, right?
Yeah, certainly. So we're recording this. It'll take a few hours to buffer. In the next couple days, I'll post the recording of today's session out on my website. And out there, I've got, I think, 6 other demos that we've done over the last several years posted as well. And you can also get in touch with me through that, or just send me a note or give me a call or whatever. But yeah, the website is where I kind of store these things just to have that place. I'm also doing a session tomorrow. I think some of you guys have signed up for that, very, very admissions focused with the same type of things. I think we have like 103 people signed up for that one tomorrow. So I'm really excited to be able to share some of these tools, a little bit further and wider. There's just so much power in this data that we have, and Blackbaud definitely doesn't make it really easy to get at it. But this is kind of our side door to be able to do 100 interesting things.
And those videos are great. I go back and watch your videos multiple times when I can't remember what we did last time.
Good, and I'm sorry. Yeah, they're generally kind of, here and there and all over the place, but we've got some good things that we've done over the years in there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for taking the time to connect this afternoon. And Amy, thank you again for being willing to share.
Happy to. Thank you, Matt.
Thank
All
you.
right. Well, everybody have a great afternoon.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.